We have been journeying through the life and times of the Avos this winter. We did Avraham, we did Yitzchak. Last week we did Yaakov and Esav. Now we're on to Yaakov. This is Yaakov's Sichos. There are two Sichos here actually. The first 2 pages is from Likutei Sichos Chelik Aleph, and the third and the fourth page are from Likutei Sichos Chelik Gimel, volume 1 and volume 3. Now, the characteristic that set Yaakov apart are Golus and Mitasa Shlema, which is the most ironic thing of all. Right? Let's put it this way. Avraham is kindness. That means peripheral, external service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yitzchak is integrity, inner service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Avraham and Yitzchak are like really, really deep into it. Yitzchak more than Avraham. Avraham has a Yishmael, Yitzchak has an Esav. What's Yaakov? Tzaddis. Yaakov is tzaddis. Tzaddis, 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 tzaddis. His life was miserable. That's the truth. His life was miserable. He says so himself. Ma'at v'roi, my life is miserable. Golus after Golus after Golus after Golus. First it's Esav, and then it's Lavan, and then it's Dino, and then it's Yosef, and then it's Shimon, and then it's Binyamin. Tzara nacha tzara nacha tzara. And he has a large family, and they're all tzaddikim. How ironic. And in terms of the journey of life, in other words, if you want to know what God is thinking, this is the program. He creates an Avraham who brings God into the world. He creates a Yitzchak who perfects what Avraham created. Then he creates a Yaakov and makes it as difficult as possible. He tests and he tests and he tests and he tests. And Yaakov survives. Oh, now the Eibush is happy. Hashem is not happy if you sit in a shtibel in Jerusalem and you have enough to eat and you're not afraid and you're not sick and it's warm and you sit and study Torah. It's wonderful. That's Avraham. That's Yitzchak. It's not Yaakov. Yaakov is lech lecha me'atzecha o me'meladetecha be'savicha in the ultimate sense. After everything is perfect, face the world. Bring the Eibishter to the most remote place. Yaakov represents Golus. His children are born in Golus. And one of the most underemphasized tragedies of Yaakov's life, he has one son brought in the Holy Land. One. You know what his name is? Binyamin. You know what happens to Binyamin? He's almost completely wiped out. Almost completely wiped out. It takes a special act of Sanhedrin to keep the few members of Binyamin alive. There should be 12 Shvat. And from those few leftovers, we got Shaul HaMelech, we got Mordechai HaTzadik, and Esther HaMalka. But they were about to wipe Binyamin off the face of the earth in the book of Judges, Pelegish Begiva. So if you read in the Chumash, Binyamin starts out with 10 children. 10 children! By the time the Jews go into Israel, Binyamin doesn't have 10 families, he has a few. All those families disappeared. And later on, they reduced to 400 people. It's almost nothing. Why? They were never not born in Golus. You get it? In other words, you think it tense, you got it wrong. And that's the story of Yaakov Avinu's life. The story of Yaakov Avinu's life is Golus. And that the greatest bracha, the greatest achievement, the greatest success, the greatest presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu shows itself dafke in a Golus environment. That's the story of Yaakov. Now, we're not going to do Yaakov in a week. It's going to take us some time. I don't know how many classes we did on Yitzchak, but we have more than that many classes on Yaakov Avinu. Okay? And that's the journey. Yaakov Avinu's life. And when we're done with Yaakov Avinu's life, then begins the Shvatim, which is even a deeper Golus, a more involved, a more complicated Golus. And that's how Sefer HaYashar is going to finish. Okay? So let's read. This Sikha I basically want to read entirely. I want to read all of it. Okay? It's page 4. There's enough copies. In Heinrich said the Werde erzählt, in this week's Parshat relates, wie an ein und einziger Jid, how one single solitary Jew is gegangen in a fremde Land, went to a foreign land. Kommen die Kahin, hat gar nicht gehabt mit sich. By the time he arrived, he had nothing left. Hat gemeint, wird haben a Vermögen. He left home with great wealth. Zum Sof hat aber gesehen. The end was, as hat gonit. Gunish, nichiva, nimnada, nothing. Ki b'makli avarti yesayadin azah. I crossed the Jordan with a stick. The Midrash Chazal tell us that Yaakov took great wealth. And Esav sent his senior son Eliphaz to murder Yaakov Avinu. Problem was, Eliphaz had a soft spot. He was Nebuchadnezzar, descendant of Yaakov, Yitzchak, and Avraham Avinu, and he wasn't a killer. So when he meets up with Yaakov, he says, "By the way, I'm supposed to kill you. What should I do?" So Yaakov says, "Take my wealth. Ani choshev kemes. A poor person is considered dead." And Eliphaz takes every penny Yaakov has, so Yaakov is financially dead. Yaakov comes to Lavan with a walking stick. And that's it. Remember as a child reading the Pasuk, he goes up to him and he hugs him. Why? He expects to see a herd of animals with servants, just like his father came, like Yitzchak, like Eliezer came. He's by himself. Hugs him, he's checking his pockets to see if he has any cash. His pockets are empty. So he kisses him on the lips. Maybe he has some diamonds in his mouth. No money. What am I going to do with you? Your grandfather's servant came with 10 camels laden with wealth. Of course I welcomed into the house. You're schnudder. What do I need? What am I going to do with you? Verstehst? That's how Yaakov came to Lavan. Says the Rebbe, Nit gucken of them, notwithstanding this, is a gegangen mit a leichter Herz und mit Mut. He went with an easy heart and with a good spirit. Girls, listen to the next words very carefully. Worum had gehad betochen in the Meibishter. He had the one thing you cannot lose. God. Now we all have God, yeah? But we only have God when we're already rich. Not when we're waiting for the wealth to arrive, you understand? We only have God when we're already healthy, not when we're sick and waiting for a transplant. Then all of a sudden we got huge issues. Yaakov Avinu had the Eibshter, and he leaned on him. And it was good enough. And that betochen allowed a man to navigate life with nothing, knowing nobody, with no support and no help, and to thrive because he had betochen in the Meibishter. Kommendik in Choron, he arrives in Choron. Hat gesehen, as a hot dort nit, he discovers that he can't rely on anybody. Euch nicht auf Kreven. He can't even trust his own relatives. He discovered even his own uncle. Lavan fools him. Hat aber nicht verloren, chas v'shalom sein betochen. Maybe she says the Rebbe a second time. But the one thing Yaakov didn't lose, because you can't take that away from any man, only a person can give it up himself, is his belief in the Eibishter. Yaakov didn't give up that betochen. That's how he lived and survived. Und der Fahr, consequently, is trotzdem, was genommen viel Jahren. It took a long time. Medreise Haravanya, a lot of effort. By night it was incredibly hot. By day it was incredibly hot. By night it was terribly cold. By Tag gebrannt die Hitz, by Nacht the frost. By day it was boiling, at night it was freezing. Fundestwegen, nevertheless. Arbeitendig, and the Rebbe says for the third time, mit betochen, he did his work and understood that not Lavan is keeping him alive, but the Eibishter is keeping him alive. Is der Safgewen, what happened in the end, as hat mit sich mitgenommen. Asach eigens. He leaves Lavan's house with incredible wealth. A große Reich of great wealth. Girls, top of page 5 now. Und der Riker, most importantly, es ist given mitase shleime. Dafke Yaakov, who has no peace and no serenity and no prospect and no vision, no future, has a perfect bed. All of his children are tzaddikim. Alle seine Kinder seine given. Wie es darf zu sein ganz beschleimus. All of his children, he had 13 of them were the way they're supposed to be. Avraham had a son Yitzchak. Avraham had a good son named Yitzchak. Had aber gehat noch a son Yishmael. He had another son. We don't like to talk about him. His name was Yishmael. Yitzchak had gehat a good son Yaakov. Yitzchak has a good son Yaakov. Had aber gehat a son Esav. You see, it's a package. Hagam ze beid Avraham und Yitzchak haben gehad über ihre Kinder in Israel nicht an Gott. Avraham raises his children in the Holy Land. Yitzchak raised his children in the Holy Land. And they were rich and comfortable and respected and looked after. The community liked them. And as they say in American, blah, 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 blah. Von deswegen, nevertheless, what you can't passieren, it could happen. V'haraya did happen. As an event, Kinder Yishmael and Esav. There were children from this home, Yishmael and Esav. dagegen Yaakov, on the other hand, Yaakov Avinu. Was mit seine Kinder, seinen Gewinn in Golus. Him and his children were in exile. Nid gehat of Ementzef Allah, and the Rebbe says for the fourth time, they had nobody they could rely on. V'yered getainet me'ayin yovei ezif, where will my help come? Yemana Yisrael Saba, that Alta Yisrael Yaakov says, where is my help going to come from? And the answer is, Ezri me'im Hashem, my help comes from God. I once saw a film of Yitzchak Rabin, Allah Shalom, describing his meeting with the Rebbe in 1972. I also saw a film of the story of how Rabin came to the Rebbe in the first place. Rabin, as you know, was killed al Kiddush Hashem. Rabin was a lover of Israel. He was a real man. He had no interest in meeting the Rebbe, none at all. And there was this guy who was his secretary, he kept on pushing him. He says, Tazovli, I hate this Baba Maisasiv. He was completely secular. So this guy created a whole scheme. He got President Shazar, who was to ask Rabin, who was our ambassador to Washington D.C. in America, to go as his representative to give the Rebbe a happy birthday on his 70th birthday. That was his shtick. You understand? So Shazar calls up Rabin and says, you got to go on my behalf to give the Rebbe a happy birthday. Rabin had no choice. He was very upset, but he went. And he says, listen, I'm not coming in the middle of the night. He knew that Yechidus is all night. I'm coming by day. And I don't want 1,001 smelly Hasidim around me. I'm going into the Rebbe and I'm leaving. He ended up coming by day, and 1,001 smelly Hasidim were around, and the Rebbe made him wait a few hours. And the Rebbe finally saw him. He walked out, staggered. He didn't walk out the way he came in. He was blown away. He wasn't blown away by the Rebbe's holiness. He wasn't blown away by the Rebbe's chokhmah. He was blown away by the Rebbe's military understanding. The Rebbe understood. He said to the person who brought him, he belongs in the Knesset, not the Knesset. He knows more about Israel and military and the borders and the whole thing. He was blown away by the Rebbe's understanding. This was between the 6th day one, the Yom Kippur War, mind you. But Rabin describes that meeting. The first half of the meeting was theology, was a discussion. The second half of the meeting was strategy. There's a famous story that Yitzchak Rabin, the Rebbe took out a map and said, show me the strategic defense of Israel. They had what was called the Bar-Lev line, which was the same thing as the Maginot line in World War II. I don't know if you're familiar with the history. And the Rebbe screamed about the Bar-Lev line. The Rebbe said, I was in France, and I went myself to examine the Maginot line. We all know what happened to the Maginot line. The Germans went through France in 6 weeks. And the Rebbe cried about the Bar-Lev line. The Bar-Lev line was a tragedy. We lost thousands of Israelis, thousands, on that thinly defended border. But anyway, so the Rebbe sat there with Rabin and said, okay, show me the defense. So Rabin tells them where they have the fortifications, and the Rebbe shows them the weaknesses. Here's a problem, here's a problem, here's a problem, here's a problem. So he gives the Rebbe answers. This is the solution to this. Anyway, eventually the Rebbe gave him problems. There were no solutions. And Rabin didn't know what to say. So he tells the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Hashem Yazor. So the Rebbe tells him, I'm talking to you like a general, you talk to me like a Rebbe. But anyway, the first half of the meeting, the Rebbe asked Rabin why he thought the Jewish people survive. Is it because of faith, or it's because of Am Levadad Yishkon, that the Jews have so many enemies, they have no friends? This was the proposal. This is how the Rebbe started the Yechidus. Why do you think Jews survive? Do they survive because of their moral pneumius, their neshama, or because of anti-Semitism and forced isolation? You know, Israel has no friends in the world. That's really true. It's so sad. There's an Arab bloc, there's a European bloc, there's a Christian bloc, there's a Hindu bloc. There is no Jewish bloc. There's one tiny nation sitting in the most boiling part of this planet, surviving. It's amazing. So he asks Rabin, what's the secret to Jewish survival? Is it the forces of the world that isolate us and force us to join together, or is it faith? And the Rebbe said it's a combination. It's both together. This is what Rabin repeated. It is the faith, but it's also the isolation. The Ezri, right? Yaakov Avinu. This is what the Rebbe is saying right here. He was alone in the world. He had no friends. Ezri Mim Hashem. That's why Yaakov survives. Avraham and Yitzchak lived in Israel. The people were nice to them. They're friends. The real Yaakov emerges in Golus because of his betachan. It's both factors. It's the betachan and it's the synthesis. It's the joining together of the challenges of being alone, that reveal the inner Jew, the inner B'tachon, that makes Yaakov the ideal Jew and the ideal father. And I'm reading on. Hat schwer gearbeitet. He worked very hard. Und einseitig damit, and at the same time, gedacht beim Worten, he had to see to it as die Kinder, Sehen und Töchter, his children, sons and daughters, 12 Kinder, 12 sons, zwischen a fremden, a ganzen fremden Volk in a completely foreign land, soll nicht übernehmen, die Hanhagis, Lebensführungen von Charen, should not assimilate. If little kids, they walk the streets, they shouldn't become like the Goyim around them, they should be distinct and different. Sie sollen Adarabe, to the contrary, onzapen sich mit der Torah, saturate themselves with the Torah, was that he, der 100 Jahre noch ältere Tate, hat übergenommen von seinen Eltern und Ureltern. Yaakov Avinu was an old man. Yaakov Avinu arrives in Charen, he's 84. So when Reuven's born, he's 84 and a half, yeah? Talk about a generation gap, huh? By the time Yosef is born, Yaakov is virtually 100 years old. And he teaches them, and they learn from him. The fact that he's so old and they're so young doesn't change anything. Und gebracht in dem neuen Land von jener Seite, and he brought his Torah from the other side of the river and so forth. Yaakov hat alles durchgesetzt. Yaakov survives everything. Und durch dem darf er only through this, ausgeführt, top of the second column, page 5, Yaakov is incredibly successful. Is geworden a größer Gewirr Poshet in Gashmis. First of all, he became Poshet physically wealthy. Und das ist gewesen emesse mutlichdike unglückliche Ashiris. But it was a healthy richness, right? Some people are rich and they have no life. Yaakov had a richness, but there was a rich life. Worum gehad die noch größer Ashiris. He had a far greater wealth. All of his children were the way they're supposed to be. Hat genommen von Golus. He took out of this Golus, alle seine Zin und Techter, all of his sons and daughters, Shleimim whole. And the Rebbe would say, not just he took them out of Golus, it's because of the Golus that they emerged from this Golus perfect and whole. This is the third of our patriarchs. Avraham is the initiator, Yitzchak is the perfecter, Yaakov is Golus, the survivor. And of course, the Rebbe goes on to say in the next few paragraphs, which we're not going to read, a lesson for us. A Jew in America has to know, you want to survive, be Jewish, not American. You be American, you're finished. Be Jewish, like Yezeda was Jewish. Okay? Now turn the page. We're now moving on to page 10. This is another Sikha, and I really don't have time to teach it, so I'm just going to have to skim it. And we're going to begin on page 11, Sif Gimel. I apologize that I'm skipping so much. If the clock would slow down, I would skip less. But the clocks don't have any hearts, so I have no mercy. What can I tell you? Page 11, Gimel. I'm reading it inside. In Parshas, the Rebbe now talks about Yaakov Avinu. He went into Golus with nothing except his faith. He came out of Golus with his faith intact and all kinds of wealth. Says the Rebbe. In Parshas Vayeteh, the Torah tells us the story. As Yaakov is gegangen von Eretz Yisrael, Be'ershavah and Choran to Lovan. He goes from the Holy Land, from Be'ershavah to Lovan. Und wie bei seinen Anheben gehen von Eretz Yisrael, as soon as he leaves home, what's the first thing that happens? His Baal Geven Vayifka B'Mokim. Boom. Who does he meet as soon as he's leaving? B'Mokim. What's Mokim mean? The Eibishter. Before he leaves, the Eibishter. Sein Gehen zurück von Choran in Eretz Yisrael. 22 years later, he's coming home from Choran to Eretz Yisrael. Und wie gehen die zurück? And as he's coming home, haben ihm begegnet Malachi Elikim. He means angels. The Rebbe has a very, very beautiful pshat here, which I'm not going to read with you, where he says, you know what the difference between Yaakov Avinu went and meets Hashem, and he comes home and meets Hashem? When he went, he met Hashem in a dream. When he came home, he met Hashem when he was awake. The Yifka B'Makom was a dream. When he comes home, he meets the Malachi Hashadas, he meets them openly. Says the Rebbe, bottom of page 11, the Pflicht von jeder Yid is, the mandate of every Jew is, to arise, so here the Rebbe is saying it's not only, well, Hashem schleps you into goals, you have no choice. No, you're living a good life. You pick yourself up and you go out of Eretz Yisrael. All the shame ve'evet. Arise came for the Dal Damas that go out of the 4 cubits of Torah. Gain kein Choran. Go to a place called Choran. Charein Afshal Mokamed, the place which angers HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Make a difference in the Eibishter's world. And the Rebbe says the very last lines on page 11, und darf gedort. When you pick yourself up and you move away and you live in this alien place over there, Dafke, Zol by the Mid and Zayim, this is where you have to produce. Where you produce perfect children. In other words, the implication is not only Yaakov didn't have a choice, but even when you have a choice, you pick yourself up, you go to a difficult place, you do what you got to do, and the Eibishter blesses you with perfect children. Turn the page. 12. When one conducts himself in this way, is the gain ken chorah, nit ken yerida mitis. Although on the surface, going to chorah is a terrible yerida, but in truth it's not a yerida at all. Why? Now, to the contrary, in chutz laretz, you become rich in wealth and rich in children. And the Rebbe says in Yiddish, men heart, grace, hatzlacha. We have incredible success. Now, second column, also the underline. And the Rebbe says, this is a lesson for us. Because man is in Eretz Yisrael, so long as you are in the Holy Land. It is eingeschlossen in the Egen and Yonei Kedusha, you're locked away in your own matters of holiness. Vernommen nor mit sich allein, busy only with yourself. Is wie great es only sein, doesn't matter how big you are. Kann nicht zukommen zu der Madrege und der Erhebenkeit, you cannot reach that level and that loftiness, zu welche der Gerecht, to which he reaches, durch sein Gehen ken chorah. When you go into a difficult situation, you reach higher levels. Zu tun in Welt und makara sein Yidden, to do in the world and bring Yidden closer, machen Yidden and create Yidden. And this is where you achieve great success. If you look at the history of the Jewish people, yeah? Torah, we have from the bloodiest times and the bloodiest places. There's 600 years of history between when the Gemara was completed in the times of the Rishonim. There's almost no svarim from the Goyim. You know why? Because of a peaceful time. The Rishonim lived in a time full of blood. The Crusades and the blood libels and all kinds of other expulsions. The Torah that we have, the Torah we have is the Torah of blood. That's just the way it is. It's an undeniable fact. Says the Rebbe, the moment you leave Eretz Yisrael, you agree to go out to Oiftan and to make a difference in this world, with Nachim of the Jewish people. Immediately, Gitmeni Makoyach Momaila, he's empowered by meeting God as Okene Durchführen and Shlichus, he should be able to fulfill his mission. And of course, when he finishes his mission, then he meets Malachi Elakim, he gets the reward for his efforts. So the point of this sikh is simple but clear. Yaakov Avinu's life is very different than Avraham Yitzchak's life. They're thriving towards holiness, towards perfection and comfort. Yaakov's life is tzaddis, and Dafka Yaakov Avinu has mitas shlema. All of his children are tzaddikim.